Welcome to Holy Shit, guys. Thanks so much for being here. This is Holy Shit 3, and we are here with some good people, and I'm really looking forward to the show. This is just a little bit of housekeeping up front. You guys, there's like over 400 people that are subscribed to this already. Please share it with your friends, even if you're with your mom, if it'll make her mad. And please go to iTunes and comment and rate my podcast, because that screws up their algorithm so they can't help but have this share with other people. And even if you don't like me, maybe you also don't like Joel Osteen, and Joel Osteen has 135 comments. So we can have more comments than Joel Osteen relatively easily. Like that shouldn't be that hard. So if you just want to like annoy Joel Osteen, which to me is a worthwhile thing for all of humanity to do right now, go on to my podcast and just like make him go like, what? I don't, what? Wait, what? And then just go back with whatever his empty head was doing beforehand. So I want to thank you guys for doing that. So we are going to be talking about Sodom and Gomorrah today with two comedians, good friends of mine, who are going to be trading off between being the smart person and the amusing idiot. They both have both of those characters in them at all times. So first off, currently based in Edmonton, we have this is also a podcast, Drew. They can't see your vision.
Oh, they can't see me? Oh. Sorry.
It's cool. Like, this works for now, but this only helps the people on YouTube.
I didn't know. Continue. I'm sorry. I'm so
even
sorry.
A podcaster who also puts your podcast on YouTube. Okay. So yeah, but Drew is here. Drew, based in Toronto, very funny comedian, has an album out called Gnarly. Please welcome, put your hands together for Drew Bame.
Woo. Oh, I haven't heard that in a month and a half. Do that again. Oh yeah, it's like heroin for me. Oh god.
It's so true, eh? Yeah. So anything interesting happening in your life, Drew? Anything you want to promote?
I mean, I will use your podcast to promote my very own podcast as well. I have it's twice a week. It's on Mondays and Thursdays, and it's on everything, and it's on YouTube. And yeah, it's called This Week with Drew. And I play piano and sing songs and talk about stuff, and I have segments, and it's very funny. So there you go.
If you watch The Bachelor, you should watch Drew's podcast.
Yes, I also do Bachelor reviews, Jeopardy reviews. There's lots of stuff going on right now. I've been talking about Love It or List It, because that's been my newest thing. So.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Dang.
Oh yeah.
I would, if they ever bring it back, I would love to do like a Great Canadian Baking Show like podcast, like one that comes up immediately after an episode airs. Like that would be, because that's what my family has been doing, is watching baking shows every night. So
that's nice. You should get on Drew's podcast to review the Fire channels with him.
Oh right.
You're doing log channel fire.
I started a Fire Channel review podcast last year. I only got like. So we can talk. I'll bring in our other guests to talk about this because he's super funny as well. Please put it together for Mav Addisor.
Woo! Hello. Happy to be here.
I kind of know you best for your extremely well-reviewed Fringe play, which was a very funny one-man show about climate change.
Yeah.
Is that a fair description of that show?
I think that it's a very generous description of the show. And actually, like, I remember handbilling at the Fringe, and it was my first day handbilling, and I'd never done the Fringe before. So like, I remember saying out loud, "Hey, come to my show. It's a stand-up comedy show about climate change." And then immediately laughing in front of her face, like this punter who I've never met. Yeah. And I had to apologize. It was like, sorry, I've never said that out loud before. It sounds crazy. I don't know if I sold her on it, but.
I mean, there are very few things as funny as the end of the world, really. when you start to add it up. Like if you're not gonna laugh, what else are you gonna do?
I think so. Yeah.
But are you in on a fire log review channel? Like I have opinions on fire logs. I don't know if you guys have opinions on fire.
I am for just kind of like wasting any amount of like a brain power on something so absurd like that. That's pretty great. You count me in.
So,
Can I get are we doing a review? Is it a review channel on the Fire Logs TV show, or is it on actual Fire Logs that you would buy?
No, like so on Netflix, there's like 7 of them, right? Like
okay, I know what you're talking about. Yes, yeah. Okay, yes.
We're reviewing different ones of those because there's good ones and there's bad ones, right?
Sure. Oh, of course. I mean, what do you want to watch a poplar click all night and crack? We can get a nice hardwood.
Tosses with them too much.
Yeah.
Pushes it around. There's always a hand in there.
Yeah. Get your hand out of there.
That's my biggest beef with Shaw lately. Shaw has gone to this, like the guy is constantly messing with the fire, and I'm like, leave it alone, like it's fine. And then he'll like go and move it around and make the fire worse. And I'm like,
unless you could turn that into a drinking game. Every time he pokes the fire, you take a drink. You're like, oh, there you go.
It always seemed to me to be a waste that it was always just a human hand. Like. You have all of this technology at your fingertips.
No, but but sometimes like they'll overdo the decor and stuff. Like they'll try to go cutesy themesy, where it's like I'm wearing a really Christmassy sweater as I poke the fire a lot.
Yeah, that's too much. They forgot who's the star of the show is, and the star of the show
is the fire.
Is the fire.
Yeah. And the whole point is to make you believe that you have a fire when you don't. And like if some random hand shows up in your fire, that's weird. And then it ruins the illusion.
Unless you come in over top and you're like, oh yeah, you time it good, and you're like, no, that's really me. No, that's just me. You get the same shirt as the guy. Like, we got to get blue flannel. He keeps changing shirts. Every episode, a different shirt.
I think you're missing a great crossover opportunity with the Food Network. And you should bring in s'mores and hot dogs and...
like, I appreciate it, but, like, this is how everything gets ruined. Everybody thinks that, like, we got to bring everything in here. And it's like, no, there was a singularity that existed when it was just, like, a fire. And you would hear the fire sound. And it was perfect. And then they're like, maybe people would like to hear Christmas music with this fire. And it's like, no, we wouldn't. Why? Why would you think that?
No one would want that.
I have a stereo if I want to listen to Christmas music. I can play the actual Christmas songs and not the cheap ones that you guys found on like Mini Pops.
It's like Michael Bublé exists for a reason, okay? I'm not going to listen to this.
Exactly. Like I could just do that. I don't need to hear your like elevator music versions of Christmas tunes. But that I get very passionate about that. Also, people that put techno beats to Christmas carols, like I definitely think that was Satan. Not that I have a great affection for Christmas carols, but it's just like no, like you're not making it better. Like you've taken two things that are fine on their own and made it objectively worse.
Oh yeah, big time. Yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna get going. We're gonna be talking about the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. Oh, I also we got to do this before we start out because we're talking about Bible stories. Like, what did you guys grow up with these stories? Were these things that you kind of heard in the ether? Did you grow up? I know a little bit about your backgrounds, but did you grow up with like? As this as part of your family tradition that like we take the Bible seriously? Like where are you at with that, Drew? You're just
oh yeah, big time. You know that we've had these conversations before, but I grew up in a very traditional Roman Catholic upbringing, and it was definitely something that's like
so
reflective in my upbringing.
These stories are familiar with you. It's like in some ways it's going back to a place you've been before. Or?
Oh yeah, big time. When my girlfriend and I watch Jeopardy, anytime there's like a biblical category, she didn't grow up religious, and like I always like nail it because they always do like surface level stuff. Like how many times are you gonna say like like Matthew or Mark or Luke? You know what I mean? Like it's pretty easy stuff, right? Like it's like they're lobbing you softies because it's like general Bible knowledge, but she doesn't know any of it, right? Like and for me, this stuff is just like it's like you know, like it seems like it's like math or something. Like you just know these things.
Yeah, it's like I grew up without cable. Like, so there's just so many television references that I don't get, and people are like, you don't remember GoBots? And I'm like, no, I didn't get GoBots. I didn't get that. It wasn't on CBC. All right, like. So what about you, Mav?
So I grew up in the Philippines, in I would say like an average household, which translates as very Catholic to everyone else.
Right.
And like I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and we were getting these like there was a
okay. So sorry, shifting gears. So grew up in the Philippines.
Right. So like yeah, and I grew up around this time when there was like a big push in the late 70s to proselytize to Japanese people.
Okay.
And so an aspect of that was creating anime that was about Bible stories.
Oh, wow.
And because of the proximity, we would get those cartoons. So like I grew up on these shows called Superbook and Flying House.
Oh, wow.
Where like these you're like these two kids and a robot friend time travel to the New Testament, you know, that sort of stuff, like super lighthearted.
Were people just cool with the robot? They didn't have any questions.
The robot had a cross on it for some reason, so it was a Christian robot. But yeah, like he would just show up and nobody questioned it.
Wow. That opens like a whole like theological can of worms about like what is the eternal destiny of robots or AI.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, like, which I'm sure has been discussed at seminaries to no end. I want to ask you a question. Please forgive me, this is ignorant, but like, it seems like the Philippines as a whole is just a more religious culture, right?
Yeah, I would say that that's probably true for most developing countries, right? Like, but the Philippines specifically was very Catholic. I think the demographics they're still mostly Catholic, but like there's been like a huge trend for Protestantism like over the decades.
Well, specifically Pentecostalism, right? Like
that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah, that seems to be the thing, and I find that kind of fascinating because like in North America, we're like specifically in Canada, we're just like everything that we like, let's just turn that down to about 4. 4 is the max.
Yeah, right.
4 is our medium level, and like you can spike from there, but we're starting at a 4. Where like it seems like other cultures, you know, like it's just like we're gonna crank that. Like our mid level is
like
7.
8 is exactly.
Yeah. You know, depending on the culture, it's just like this is our midpoint is 7, and yeah, we're gonna move up and down from there. But you know, the equivalent level of like extremism or non-belief is like the same. It's just that you're already turned up that much.
Well, and one of the consequences of that is that like now a lot of parishes end up importing Filipino priests because there's not as many Canadians in the seminary or something.
Yeah, when I was first doing Bible college, I remember Vancouver School of Theology, which is like a United Church seminary, had like 14 full-time faculty and 12 full-time students. Like, that's not sustainable. But
on campus.
On campus. Well, no, I think it was even it's united, right? What's the point?
Wow.
Right? Like, because that's the problem with the fully liberal things. It's like if I don't believe in anything anyway, then what's the point, right? You're like, not to be rude, but right? Like it's just like if you don't, you know, if it's just like I don't think that going to church is any different than going to brunch, then go to brunch. Like that is.
Oh man,
I'm a believer, and that's a relatively easy choice. Like, if you don't think that this matters, like, mimosas are a way better option. We're going to talk about Sodom and Gomorrah. So I'm going to jump in I'm going to jump into the story right now, and start off with Sodom and Gomorrah. Now, this story starts off with God coming down to earth, and God is specifically coming down to visit Sodom and Gomorrah. And he says, I'm coming down to check out, because he says, the cry of their evil has reached up to me, and I want to hear if it's as bad as they say. So so I'm going to visit Sodom and Gomorrah, and I'll find out, and then I'll know if it's really bad. So on his way to Sodom and Gomorrah, he stops and he visits his friend Abraham, and he already knows Abraham has made a bunch of promises to Abraham about like the kind of nation that's going to be developed through him. All peoples will be blessed through Abraham, and all that kind of stuff. But he stops in to see him right before. And then he says, like, okay, well, I'm going to let Abraham know what I'm doing with Sodom and Gomorrah, because he's got some relatives there and stuff. So he's just like, hey, going to Sodom and Gomorrah, I might destroy it if their evil is as bad as people say. Now, because it's 2020 in North America, I got to back up a little bit and kind of remove some stuff that we might think about this story from our heads. Because when we say the word sodomy in English in this period of time in history, that word means homosexual sex acts between males. It didn't always mean that. And while that's pretty old in Christianity, it wasn't always the case. None of the first hearers of this story would have assumed that was the great evil that they were doing. And in fact, it's really not until about Augustine, which is like a few hundred years after Jesus, that you really start to see that kind of idea become the norm. And in fact, we're told what the evil of Sodom was in the book of Ezekiel later on, where in the book of Ezekiel, it says that the evil that Sodom and Gomorrah committed was that they had, and this should concern us as North Americans, that they had pride and excess of food, prosperous ease, but did not aid the poor and the needy. So that was the evil that came up to them. It seems that there was a group of people that had a lot, and then exactly. Yeah, there's
you invite angels into an orgy one time, and suddenly that's the only thing
That's the only thing that they did bad. Yeah. Well, that's going to come up, but it's interesting. Like, the starting point doesn't seem to be the sexual promiscuity. The starting point is that, like, some people had a lot and then they didn't share it with people who needed things. And that's thematic across the entire Bible, that's the thing that really pisses off God the most. And it's interesting to look at this structurally, that like homosexuality is talked about 6 times in the entire Bible, whereas like hundreds of times it's like, how did you treat the poor? Did the poor have equal access to the justice system? Like all of these things that we should probably be concerned about as contemporary North Americans. And it's interesting because like I've heard multiple biblical scholars who have said that the people of Sodom have genuine beef if they go to God and they're like, hey, what about those guys? Like, well, how come we got rained on, but they didn't? And that'll come later. So he stops in to see Abram to say, like, the cry of Sodom's evil has reached up to me. I'm going to go check it out. And so Abraham, knowing that he's got some family there and probably knowing some other people there, sidles up to God and it's just like, hey, I know that you're concerned about the whole city being righteous, but like, what if there's 50 righteous people living in the city? Like, what if they're not all evil, right? What if there's 50 righteous people there? It's not like you're not the kind of guy that's going to destroy everybody just because like the righteous people with the really bad people, right? And God's like, yeah, you're right. Okay, fine. If there's 50 righteous people there, I won't destroy the city. And Abraham's like, okay, cool. What if 5 of those people turn out to be kind of shitty? Like, what if we think that there's 50, but then 5 of them are like, oh no, they were also like destroying the poor as well. So can we like, are you still going to destroy it? And then God's like, okay, you're right. I'm not going to destroy it if there's 45 righteous people. And Abraham's like, cool. How about 40? Is 40 cool? Like if there's 40 righteous people, right? You're not going to destroy the city then. And God's like, okay, fine. If there's 40 righteous people, I'm not going to destroy the city. And then Moses is like, look, I don't want to bug you, God. You're holy and I am ashes and dust. But what if there's only 30? What if there's only 30 righteous people? Is that 30's good, right? Like 30 is fine. Like if there's 30 people, you're not going to destroy. And God's like, okay, fine, 30. If there's 30 people there, I won't destroy. If there's 30 righteous people in the city, I won't destroy it. And he's like, okay. And then Moses is like, is 20 good? What about 20? 20 is still a lot of people. That's like 3-4 families there, right? Like that. What about 20? And God's like, fine, 20. And Moses is like, look, I don't want to bug you. 10. I just think 10 is a lot. For if there's 10 righteous people, then maybe that's enough. And finally, God is just like, yeah, fine. If there's 10, I will not destroy the city. And Abraham stops pushing his luck and settles at 10. And so we have this.
Wait, is Abraham Jewish?
Yeah.
I mean, the joke was
most
just
annoying Kijiji negotiator.
It is sitting there.
Right.
It was sitting right there, man. He fucking, he got him down. He got him down.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Continue. That was inappropriate.
No. Even the rabbis would be like, yeah, we came by it honestly. Like this.
10? Well, if you do 10, then you'll do 9. What? What's wrong with 9? 8?
And the story is amazing because it does start at 50, and like as many steps as I said, those are written in the story. It's not like it's not like there's like a couple of sentences to fill in where it was like Moses barking him down to. Sorry,
barking him. Good save there, Dan.
It's in my head. It's my. I grew up with this. I grew up in PEI in the 90s. There was lots of bad things that we said.
It's heritage, not hate.
But yeah, so like every step he bargains him down. I think it's a really fascinating moment, in this. But it's also like, it's not only that, it's also like God is just like willing to be talked down a little bit, right? He's just like, okay, I'm open to a negotiation. What are we talking here? Like, what are you? Although we never see him being like, so what's in this for me? Like, how many, like, do I get more righteous people later on? Oh. Like, how's that going to work? So we're going to take a break in the story now because this story is really 2 stories. That's the first part of the story. And the next part of the story, we're going to get to Sodom. But I want to take, we're still early stages of the show, so we wanted to add some fun stuff. So I wanted to add something called unofficial expert, which is that you guys are comedians. You're kind of experts in your field there, but everybody is also an unofficial expert on something else that they like a lot, right? So you guys have brought some stuff. I want to have a conversation about something about which you guys are unofficial experts. So if it's okay, Drew, we'll start with you, because in this time of COVID-19, you've been living with the breads for a long time. You are like, so the whole world has been like, I have a lot of time on my hand, I'm gonna bake bread, but like Drew is like a bread hipster. You've been there for a very, very long time talking about the breads. Like talk to me about your bread passion.
Yeah, that's true. So this is me and a couple other comedians were talking about it, but the way that people are living now is how comedians live. It's like, like I got all day. What are we gonna do today? Like I'm gonna go for a little run. I'm gonna, like get it. So yeah. I've been baking sourdough bread for like the last couple of years, at least the last 2 and a bit years. And I don't know, my family's always been a big cooking family or whatever, and it was something that I wanted to get into after purchasing a Lodge Dutch oven, cast iron Dutch oven. I was buying it initially for like roasting chickens. I was trying to perfect a roast chicken, and then I had read up that a Dutch oven was good because it's got a heavy lid and it keeps the steam in. So I bought one of those, and then I was like, what are other things I can do with the Dutch oven? Oh, you can make sourdough. So I started making sourdough, and I'm happy you asked me earlier when you asked me if I want to talk about bread, if I was mad about the explosion of people making bread, and in fact, just the opposite, because to be mad about other people making bread is like, I can see where someone might, who was interested in it as a hobby and viewed it the same way as they would a cool band or an activity that you were into before it was cool being into, but nobody owns bread. Bread owns humans. There would be no agricultural development without our ability to figure out how we could get the wheat grain milled down and mix it with the element of fire for sustenance. Because if you gave a human a bag of flour and a bottle of water, and they would die. But if you gave them a bottle of water and a bag of flour and heat, they could live forever. So that right there, and the ability to like, you know, like really get like agricultural farming of the grain of wheat, and letting us like stabilize and centralize around that wheat grain for the sustenance of bread helped us like build societies like in an anthropological sense. You know, it's like very important to the context of human history, I believe.
Do you think that, like, have you learned any, like, do you feel like you're a different person? Like, have you learned anything that like connects you to your ancestors? Do you think, like, this is where we get all weird and spiritual about bread, but it's just like, there are very few things that we can do now that our ancestors did and had the same experience with, right?
Wow, I'd never even thought of that.
You know, like, so like so I can form a dough, right, into a ball and put it, and then it comes out and it's golden brown, and I can share it with my family. Like ancient cave peoples did the exact same thing in whatever variety it was, right? Do you feel like that's altered yourself at all, or?
I mean, I'd never considered that perspective, but maybe on like a deeper level, it's helping me connect with like, because it is a very like, you know, it seems like a natural process. It feels like swimming almost. Like it's like there's this something that like seems very human about it, and the process is very nourishing and it's rewarding, and the whole thing is itself like a very like, I don't know, it takes time and it takes effort, and you know, you really have to think about it and plan the steps out, and you have to, you know, factor time into it as well. That's the other thing, is like time is a huge ingredient in this. It's flour, water, salt, and yeast, but it's also the fifth ingredient of time, which people don't. And that's what also I think helps like separates, you know, the dumb guy who just mixes the flour with the water versus the smart guy who decided to let it wait a day and then bake it. And then his was better, and his family was smarter and stronger because they had better bread instead of the rock loaf that friggin' Fred Flintstone's cooking down the way or whatever, you know?
Do you, like, one of the things that I find interesting about this is like, how do you engage with it where, again, like, I'm gonna back up and try and remember what I was actually trying to say because I forgot. But like, this is where I was going. So you're a sourdough guy, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm gonna edit that out later, all my dumbness. But like, so you're a sourdough guy. There's a part of that that feels to me, because sourdough is a living thing that you have to maintain, otherwise it'll die or it'll overtake everything and outgrow its own container. It's part of me that like feels like it's like this weird living Tamagotchi that I can eat.
That's very true. Yes, it is. Yeah, it is.
How do you feel about, like, is sourdough just better? Like, or like, is that just is that a more pure experience, or is that a better way to make bread, or?
Yeah, man, that's the vinyl, bro. That's the B cuts, man. I'm talking that straight non-analog, bro. That's what I'm about, man. None of this commercial Fleischmann's with your little Ziploc bag of yeast dumping it in there. I'm talking the deep cuts, Bob Dylan 62, man. I'm talking Miles Davis 51, Columbia Records, the first editions, bro. Live sessions with the quintet.
Because there's a part of me that feels like a little bit, because I like a sourdough, but there's part of me that feels like when somebody's just like, here, try this like 75-year-old whiskey, and I'm like, tastes like burning.
Yeah. That's true, but I mean, like, I don't know. For me, it's just I like the process of it. It's not necessarily like I use commercial yeast, like I use instant yeast and quick rise yeast and stuff. But and it's the end product is great. Like, you know, it's awesome. It's just the same. It's nobody should knock it, but there is just something about that. Like, yeah, man, I've always been like that. I've always kind of liked very like simple basic stuff. Like I got a Stratocaster and I plug it into my one good amp, and I got like, you know, I kind of like just to have the authentic thing, you know, like the nice real thing. If I'm gonna do the thing, you know, I want to do it properly and authentically, and, you know, just do it right, or else I'm not even gonna do it.
So we're like, wherever we are in pandemic, people are like, I'm thinking I'm gonna do bread too. Do you have like a starting point for them? Is there like anything that you're just like, what's the easiest thing that they're not going to screw up so that they won't get discouraged and never do the bread anymore?
I mean, the number one thing, if you're going to start sourdough baking or any sort of baking, is having a proper kitchen scale. If you don't have a proper kitchen scale, and then in addition to that, a stainless steel mixing bowl, then you're kind of like, there's no really point in doing it, because a cup of flour can, depending on how you pack it, how you do it, can weigh discrepancies of like 30 to 40% on a visually exactly the same cup of flour, right? So if you have a kitchen scale, that's the best way to get started in baking.
Nice. Okay, kitchen scale. All right, Mav, it's your turn. You're gonna sell us on a Nickelodeon show that you really love called The Adventures of Pete and Pete.
That's right. Yeah. The Adventures of Pete and Pete started off as these like interstitials between Nickelodeon shows.
Okay.
And it's just the story of these two redhead brothers, both named Pete, and they just live in this town called Wellsville, and they have these like surreal adventures. And it was just something that I grew up watching as a kid, and it seems to have like gotten a resurgence in the aughts because people kept I guess requesting it, so they started re-releasing like DVD collections of the show. It's made by Viscardi and Will McRobb and Chris Viscardi, who they made that movie Snow Day, which was filmed in Edmonton.
Hey, I was in that movie.
Oh, word!
I was an extra in the running down the hill scene during the big snowball fight.
Oh, that's awesome! Yeah, and
I was
actually,
like 11.
like Snow Day was it had a lot of like kind of similar flavors to Pete and Pete. Where it's like it's these two ginger siblings, and the younger one's always a terrorist, and the older one's always trying to like date a girl. But it's just like a fun
urges, you know. Like
that's right. But it's just like it's a fun little time capsule between like the very late 80s to the early 90s. And then you get like all these fun cameos, like LL Cool J as a school teacher, you know, or like Iggy Pop is there as like the neighbor's dad.
Right.
Yeah, like Michael Stipe shows up as an ice cream man. Just like really weird cameos. And it's just a fun, like surreal adventure that we don't really see much of anymore. Like a lot of the shows, there's like it's basically just like it's just like a remix version of like these sexy teens are solving mysteries or whatever.
Yeah, they made Archie hot in River.
Yeah, right, exactly. And
yeah, what was that about?
And so it was like, this was not what I watched as a kid.
Well, I find this idea of nostalgia, like for old television shows, fascinating because it's like if you, and it's hard to imagine, but if you came to this as like flat now, would you be as interested in it? Would you still have
I think because it had nothing to do with like the styles of that time period. So it's not like you're nostalgic the way you would be for like old cartoons or something like that. I think that it just kind of it was this perfect snapshot of suburban living. And even as a kid in the Philippines, still being a suburban kid, there was something about that was like that really got it, which I really appreciated, and then just kind of like skewed just a little bit so that it's surreal. But yeah.
Do you have kids yet, Matt?
No kids. But I've got a little brother who's 18 years younger than me.
Okay. Because I find that to be sort of an interesting thing. Because, like, I don't know if you guys are old enough to remember Voltron, but like, Netflix has released 7 new seasons of Voltron that my kids love. Right? They're new, re-upped the reboot of the Voltron story.
Right.
Like, and I was like, hey, let's watch these old ones from 1984. They were what I grew up on. And they're going to be awesome. And then I sat down with my kids to watch them, and they were not awesome.
No,
not at all.
It was just like, wait a minute, all of these fight scenes are the same. Like, it seems like they animated one fight where Voltron fought another giant robot and then like made slight changes every time.
It's almost as if this was just some sort of commercial for me to buy an action figure.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I'm always curious to revisit some of those things and be like, is this still good? Or were we just collectively dumb? Like, I'm trying to imagine watching The Dukes of Hazzard as an adult, a show that I loved as a child.
And the only cool part was when they jumped into the car through the windows.
Yeah, that still would be cool. I would be down with any show. That is still awesome. Yeah, but I will definitely check that out. The Adventures of Pete and Pete. I will turn my children onto that, and I'm down for anything with Michael Stipe cameos.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, I saw my favorite tweet that I saw recently was, I do not feel, and it's sort of obtuse in the way that just tickles my fancy. I do not feel the way REM told me that I would feel at this particular moment. Oh yeah, that's my particular brand of annoying smart guy humor. We're gonna jump back into the story because it's about, if it didn't get weird beforehand with Moses bargaining with Abraham. Sorry, Moses bargaining with God. Sorry, I'm just like, I caught myself again where it was like, I almost said that.
Thank you, Drew.
No problem.
Oh man, I almost got myself canceled. So we're going to pick the story back up again because the next thing that happens is God's got 2 messengers. A lot of us interpret those as angels, but the word for messengers and angels is the same in the Old Testament, which I always enjoy thinking of them as just being like Canada Post employees. That always helps me imagine the story a little bit better.
Nice.
So God has sent his 2 messages forward into Sodom, and they get to Sodom and they meet Lot, who was sitting at the city gates. And when they come there, and Lot's like, hey, welcome to town. And Lot being Abraham's nephew, and they're like, hey, how's it going? And he's like, oh, you guys just got here. You should come to my house and eat, and I will feed you, and you can stay at my place tonight. And the messengers are like, actually, no, we were just figured we want to check out the town, so we were figuring we were just gonna like sleep in the city square tonight. And then Lot is like, no, maybe not the best idea. You should come to my place. I will have bread for you and food. And they're like, okay. So he does. He goes in and they eat together. It says very specifically that they had a feast and they had unleavened bread and they're in the house together. So they're all in Lot's house in the town now. Lot and his family and the messengers of God. And then the story says very clearly that every man in the city, young and old, every single man from the entire city gathers outside Lot's house in Sodom. And they say, hey, where are those two visitors to the city? Bring them out that we may know them. Now, know is a Hebrew euphemism for have sex with. So every man in the city, young and old, has gathered outside, and they're like, "Send out. We want to have sex with these two guys that are just visiting the city." And Lot says, "Hey, not cool, guys. Like these guys are guests under my roof now. Like that's not a good thing for you to do. I have these two daughters who have never known a man. I could send them out to you, and you can do with them as you will." And the man of the city, young and old, every single one of them say, no, not cool. We want the two messengers that are visiting the city. And in fact, who are you, immigrant, to be telling us what we should be doing? We're going to do worse to you than you did to them. At this point, they start to break down the door. At this point, the messengers from God intervene, our Canada Post employees, intervene, and they're like, okay, not cool. And they immediately make every man outside of Lot's doors blind. And the story says clearly that once they became blind, they wore themselves out groping for the door, which I would not have done. I would have given up long before I got tired. I would have been like, I can't see now. I'm just going to sit down for a little bit. And but so they're all blind, and then the messengers say to Lot, okay, God sent us here to see if we should destroy the city. We think that we're just going to follow through with that plan, so you need to get you and your family out of here. And Lot's like, but why? And they're like, cause so you need to go. That, and Lot goes to try and gather his entire family to do this, including his daughter's future husbands. So he goes to get the future husbands, and he's like, hey, can you come and we need to get out of the city because God's going to destroy it. And they're like, nah, that's not, you're just joking. That's not actually going to happen. The messengers are like, no, it's actually going to happen. You guys need to run for the hills and don't look back. And Lot is still kind of a dummy, and he's trying to argue and bargain on his own. He is his uncle's nephew. And he's like, look, I don't want to run to the hills. There's like a smaller town over there. Can I just go to the suburbs and that'll be cool? And they're like, no, God's actually going to destroy the thing. And he's like, but what about basically the equivalent of Fort Saskatchewan to Edmonton? He's like, can I just go to Fort Saskatchewan and maybe don't destroy Fort Saskatchewan? And finally, like the messengers are like, look, time is running short. God's about to destroy this place. So yeah, you guys can go. They go, they're running out. And then it says that Lot's wife turns back towards Sodom, and she becomes a pillar of salt. It doesn't use the active verb that says she was turned into. She just becomes a pillar of salt, as you do. And then God proceeds to rain fire and brimstone down upon Sodom and Gomorrah, destroying them. And the story ends with basically the image of Abraham waking up, going out on the hill and looking out over the valley and seeing the smoke rise from Sodom and Gomorrah as it rises from a furnace. And that's the end of the story.
So did all those dudes didn't get it on, eh? That's a bummer.
It doesn't sound like it. It sounds like they wore themselves out groping for the door. Now,
it feels like
groping for more.
Well, I was about to say there's lots of weird euphemisms that can sometimes exist in Hebrew that I think if we go there in our heads, it's probably fair to say that they went there as well. Humans are not that different than we have been for a few hundred years. But yeah, sorry, Mav, I interrupted you.
No. It feels like a heckle gone horribly wrong. You know, where you're trying to troll these fools by saying, "Hey, we're gonna do sex to your guests," and that's like, not only does that like freak out the guests, it also provides them an opportunity to diss their daughters as being undesirable. You know, and then even as they're magically blinded, they become so committed to just ruining these people's evening.
Well, that's what's so okay. So the story is obviously what's interesting is like we were ready. Most people when they've heard this story are ready for the like, oh right, they all the men in the town go around and they want to have sex with the two angels. You know, we were down for that. But we're all still pretty shocked today by the like, but you can have my daughters, right? Like that is morally repugnant to us, you know? But yet this is in the story, right? And I think it's fair to say that like throughout the book of Genesis, Lot is continually portrayed as an idiot. Like Lot and Abraham kind of have this Goofus and Gallant relationship. I don't know if you guys remember those from when you were a little kid, but like there was these set of cartoons where like Goofus was like, you know, it'd be like Gallant sits up straight at the table and eats with a knife and fork, and it's like Goofus sits down on the floor and smashes a plate off his face, right? It was this kind of
it sounds like a PEI thing.
Maybe, but Abraham like makes good decisions while Lot makes bad decisions, right? So part of what they're saying is that like moving to this town was amongst his bad decisions, and then so I think it's fair to us to say that like sending your daughters out to the mob is also a bad decision, right? Like, yeah, like Drew, you were shocked by this. You said you had grown up with these stories. Had you not heard that before? Or had you forgotten?
Not the second part of that where it's like, nah, but you can have my daughters, bro. Like, what? Like, you just met these dudes, man. That's your daughter, bro.
Well, it's really interesting because the entire story is framed in a ridiculous manner, right? Like Sodom and Gomorrah portrayed as these like cities of thousands of people, and yet it says every single man, young and old, showed up, and it's like
That's so funny.
Like you can't get every man, young and old, to show up for an Oilers game, and yet you're able to get every single dude to show up and be like, what is there's new guys in town for us to bang? Like I guess I can be into that, you know? Like it's so far out there, it starts to stretch. Like you cannot, like there's an aspect of the story where it's just like it was never intended to be taken literally, you know? Like it wasn't, like it's so far stretched already, you know? Like how could you possibly interact with this? And
right,
you know, and given what we know beforehand, about the cry of their evil reaching up into heaven, like what do you guys think about? Like it seems like everyone was participating in this, right? Like it doesn't
totally
seem like,
it also gives God a very Batman vibe.
Oh, okay, talk to me about that.
Just that like these people's sin created a bat signal that he had to like show up there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's because usually like there's vengeance and stuff like that, but like he's always, there's something about showing up at the place that's just like, you're like the creator of the universe.
Yeah.
Like these guys must have been doing some really heinous shit for you to just pause everything and then show up, you know?
Well,
but like who's crying out? Like that's the thing. Like is it the poor, the inequity, like the
okay.
Like is that what, like, because that's what Ezekiel seems to say. You're gonna die, Drew?
Yeah, almost. Sorry, I thought I was trying to slide that under the radar there.
Do you have a cord or anything, or are you stuck?
No, I only got with my headphones.
Okay,
it only takes up one at the same
time. It's okay. We're about roughly an hour anyway, but I want to ask you the question. We'll continue a little bit with Mav. Like what do you think, what is the point of this story? Do you feel like there's a point to the story?
Oh yeah, I think the point of the story is that I think the true point of the story is that when there is a sign or a signal from God, whether it be a literal messenger telling you to do something or maybe something less suggestive, that you should probably do that.
Like don't
like argue. If so, yeah, like there's a literal dude being like, whether he's got it like a Canada Post, but heaven logo on, being like, we're about to murk this whole city, so you need to evacuate, or something less subtle, maybe, perhaps a different sign suggesting that you should do something else, in your life, if you want to take it more generally. But yeah, I think that's the point of it, is that you should probably just keep your ears open.
So like one of the stories that we ask about this is like, these stories are thousands of years old. This one, whether for good or for evil, is one of the most influential stories of the last 500 years. We've got literal laws named after this story.
Yeah.
Should we stop telling it because it's led us to astray a little bit? Because I don't think that this story is about the sex. Like, that's my opinion of it. But like, should we stop telling it because we got it wrong, or should we continue to tell it but make sure we get it right? Or should we, what do you think we should do with it?
I think it's just the underlying education, because a guy like you and I are able to decipher that. But if you have a person who's underlying a less educated person, they're more inclined to lean towards the negative aspect of that story rather than take it for what it was actually meant to be. So I think it has to be like a baseline, like before you even start introducing the concept of the story to a person, they need to understand, not like contextualize the story itself, but then also just have a general intelligence to be able to not, and like also starting with peace and then moving to the story, like if a person has hate in their heart, this is a really big bullet for them, right?
You're going to use it to confirm your own cognitive biases,
right?
Yeah. See all these curves get burned, right?
Yeah, it seems like the story of Sodom and Gomorrah is kind of like the word literally, where it's like it used to mean one thing,
sure,
and then we ended up making it about this whole other thing that it really wasn't what it was.
Now it means like literally the opposite.
Yeah, it's like, because it used to mean like not symbolic, and now it also means symbolic somehow. Whereas it's like, a bunch of US governors saw this and thought, oh, butt stuff. And it's like, no, it's not actually about that. It's like, okay, cool. So butt stuff, and then it just kind of got stuck there. I do like the idea of like seeing this and like hearing your your insight on the story, Dan. I'm even more convinced now than when I was first forming this opinion that like this is really fun to see it as a comedy of errors,
right?
Like not as this like tragedy but just like the utter devotion of an entire populace of people just like trying to shit on this one guy that I guess they wanted out of their town.
Yeah. We hate this immigrant so much. We want to bang his guests.
Yeah, totally. Just like we want to ruin your nice evening. Like us, the entire town.
All of us collectively, every man of every age. There's another thing too. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, Dan, I was going to say there's two things you said that have been helpful to me. One is the recognition that all the people came, that there's hyperbole here, and maybe the story isn't literal. That's the first time I've heard anybody say that. That's helpful. And I forgot the other thing I was going to say. Sorry.
Well, the emphasis on the inequality in the beginning is like, you know, if we're actually going to be serious and not just goof around, like when you talked about how their great sin isn't the butt stuff, it's the inequality. But you can't, I guess, like, you know, you can't make mega churches when you think that way.
Oh yeah, and if Drew, if you got to go, then you got to go.
Yeah, do you mind? Yeah, I was just sending you a message there. Hey, thanks. Yeah, can I say bye before my phone dies? Okay, well, this was okay. Bye. I mean,
thanks so much, Drew, for being here.
Yeah, this was fun. It was nice to catch up with you guys. It was so nice to see you again.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
See you, man.
Bye, Teddy. Bye. Okay. Bye, Carol.
Drew.
Nice. Yeah.
Well,
Bye.
Okay. Bye, guys.
Yeah. I definitely think that that's important, Mav. Just talking about that idea of like I guess one of the things that we should think if we're listening to a story is here's a group of people that God, a collective that God got so angry about because of the way that they were treating each other that he was compelled to destroy them. And
yeah,
I think one of the dangerous things that we always do in our own cultures is we assume that that's always someone else, right? That's another culture that it's never us, right? It's never us that's bad. It's always someone else. And yet when you read the story, I think it's really important that the story seems to be saying, actually, no, you should be looking at yourselves, right? And if you want to use the exact language of Ezekiel, which is pride, excess of food, prosperous ease, like those are pretty clear ways to describe like Western North American culture right now, right? And I guess what I'm trying to ask for the people who are here and you specifically, Mav, is like, you know, should we be worried about fire and brimstone?
I mean, you know, speaking as somebody who's currently living in the weirdest, most sci-fi moment in all of human history.
Yeah.
I think we're already getting smote.
Yeah.
Smitten.
What?
Yeah, I feel like we're getting there. You know.
Yeah.
I feel like we're in it.
Yeah. Well, and it would be the God. So scripturally in the Bible, God seems to be a big fan of ironic punishments. So it would be really hilarious if like we all burned ourselves to death rather than he having to do it for us. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like poor McMurray burning.
Yeah. Oh, well, yeah.
Too soon.
Somebody's getting canceled.
I'm not saying it's some kind of punishment.
That was 2 years ago. They should get over it.
We can start making fun of those weirdos again. They're just in the middle of a flood right now.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a lot of calamities happening in Fort Mac, and I'm not trying to say that but also, do you think a big discrepancy between the richest of the rich and the poorest of the poor?
Yeah, I mean, I think that plays out globally, and then it's played out in our cities as well, right? And,
yeah, totally.
And you know, and like I guess because it's really easy to be like to look at the worst photos from the developing world and be like, oh well, if I was there, I would intervene, right? And it's like, okay, but what about the differences in educational quality between an urban center and a rural or a reservation in Alberta, right? Like these are things that we, in theory, have some tangible control over, right? And
also knowing how economic systems work, like understanding that, like by existing the way that you do, you are in effect like you are there. Mm-hmm. Just those effects aren't being felt by you.
Right.
It's being felt by these people who are being exploited or whose resources are being exploited. You know, like we're already all everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I think it's interesting because there's like a strain of theology that talks about like how God claims sovereignty over all the earth. There's not a thing on it that isn't his. And I think it's interesting that in some ways, and I think that like, and as someone who believes that that's true, it's also true that humanity is interconnected enough at this point in time where there's really no place on the planet that we can say, well, that has nothing to do with me. And
Totally.
it's like, well, unless you're living off the grid somewhere, like it does. And then you've got the privilege to live off the grid somewhere, like to make that a choice. Right.
Right.
Yeah. And that's, just to clarify a couple of things about the story that I think just need to be said out loud. I think that we can all, there's 4 of us in the room right now or some more. I think we can all agree that mass sexual assault by an entire town on guests is a bad thing, right? Like we're all on the same page.
Or daughters.
Or yeah. Well, that was the second one.
Even sexual assault in non-mass form.
Sure.
That's a good
thing.
Right. Yeah.
I was gonna start small and build my way.
And then yeah, right. Get specific, right?
Like in the same way that Abraham was like 50. Well, what about 45? You know, I was gonna start with like we can all agree.
An entire city's worth of men.
Yeah, taking on 2 people is bad. Simultaneously, the moral of that condenses to no matter how far you go, that non-consensual sexual activity is always bad, right?
Absolutely. Like, but also I think that inherent in that, I think that we can also probably all agree that having an entire town threaten to have sex with your guests is kind of funny, like a little bit, just in the magnitude of its absurdity.
Well, yeah, and I think you're approaching something that I think affects the way that I view the Bible, because like taking off the mask of the show for a second, like I believe that the Bible is true. I believe that the Bible is serious and is worth taking seriously. But simultaneously, I think we do ourselves a disservice in our interpretation if we act as if things that are bizarre and strange in the Bible aren't bizarre and strange at all, right?
Right.
Like there's no time in human history where they would have been like, right, that's what that whole town of men wanted to do, right? So if that's our first visceral reaction to the story, I don't think we do ourselves a service and learn more about the story by then throwing on 7 layers of theology to interpret it through in order to get there. It's just like, why don't we have the story be the story and then adapt our theologies to the story? That seems to be what we were given. Because if you're a person who believes that this is true, like I do, and lots of people don't, and you're welcome here if you don't, that's fine. But like one of the things that happens in the way that we interpret the Bible is that we get a theological grid and then we force the Bible into it, you know, which is not the way that we were given this thing. The theology came afterwards. We were given this collection of stories first. So, you know, that's one of my biases, is that like, yeah, if you're just like, wait a minute, isn't it weird that an entire town of men were all showed up and were interested in these 2 guys? It's like, yes, it's that we should notice that. We should, you know, respect our initial visceral reactions to the stories. You know,
yeah, because otherwise you get the Star Wars prequels,
right? Yeah. If you listen, there's actually an interesting moment in episode 2 because Noor Hadidi was on, and she's a practicing Muslim woman, and we were just joking that like Old Testament, New Testament, and the Quran are sort of like the 3 series. Like,
oh, perfect.
You know, and everybody's got their favorites and they all argue.
That's a tasty one. Yeah.
So, you know, like we're all arguing over the same collection of stories, but it's just like, I think mine are the most true interpretation. And I mean, invariably, it's whichever one you happen to grow up with, right? Like that's.
It's weird how that is the case.
Yeah.
What a coincidence.
Is there like I'm sure that there's a kid out there, or not a kid now, but there's like a younger person who's like the first Star Wars movie that they saw was The Phantom Menace, and they're like, no, I think that was the truest. That's the truest interpretation of this story. And then really the second movie that is all about like the workings of the intergalactic Senate and Long Obtuse Conversations. It's really kind of like Leviticus. You know, like just with less animal sacrifice, you know, but I don't know who Jar Jar Binks is, but I need to spend more time in this for my master's studies. Oh man. Well, this was a blast. Thank you guys so much for hanging out. I am I'm about to close this off. So same question that I put to Drew, I put to you, Mav. Like what do we toss this, turn it up, tame it? How do you think that we should be approaching this?
You know what? Just turn it up. I think we could do with a little more reminding about how a big focus of the Bible was trying to cure inequity. You know, I feel like with what is that like? There's a specific kind of evangelical where it's all like prosperity gospel or something like that.
Right, health and wealth or prosperity gospel.
Right. Yeah. I feel like that's had a long time in the sun now, you know, and yeah, we could do with a little reevaluating.
We need to bring back some of the fire and brimstone. Only
I think so. Sure.
I think it's interesting. That's an interesting. We could do with a little bit more fire and brimstone and a little bit more fear. Only have it be the things that God was actually mad at.
Exactly. You know, like
we don't like and wish that God were mad at. Yeah. Well, again, thank you everybody for showing up. Thank you, Mav. Thank you, Drew. Even though Drew's not here, thank you, Carol, for showing up in person. And we will be back next week when we'll be talking about another story with some other people. I have one guest confirmed, actually. Teddy, who is that?
Mark Sandel.
Yeah, Dr. Mark Sandel from King's University is going to be here.
Nice.
And we're going to be telling. He's an English professor, literature professor. So we're going to be. I'm going to be trying. We're going to be trotting out another story.
History, I think, actually.
History? Oh, I thought it was literature. I'm sorry. But yeah, we will be talking about another story where multiple things die and potentially people are eaten by animals. So we'll take it from there. Okay, cool. Thanks everybody for showing up.
Thank you so much.
No, thanks for coming, Mav. You were awesome, bud. We'll have you back again.
Great. Yeah, no, thanks. Take care.
Thanks so much, guys. Bye-bye.
Hi, Carol. How's it going? Oh, maybe I should stop this.
I'm going to mute and stop the video. And then before I can close the meeting,